Welcome back to another Ret Paladin video. Verabin here. Today we're going to be doing a guide on all things legendaries, and as Shadowlands gets closer, it's only about 2 weeks away at this point, and I don't believe we're going to see any significant changes to tuning and things like that to legendaries. So for now, we're going to talk about how you acquire legendaries, which ones we think are going to be the best in terms of rated arena, Mythic Plus, and rating as well. So we're going to give them a grade from S tier to A, B, C tier for all three of those different types of content, because depending on the content that you want to do, some legendaries might be better and some might be worse. So it's just going to kind of depend. And then from there, we're also going to talk about kind of the logistics of how do you craft legendaries and what are the kind of things that you need to do to actually unlock legendaries and all that good stuff. So there's a lot of complexity here in how this gets done. So I want to make sure that my fellow Ret Paladins out there are ready to go and you have all the good information that you need. So let's hit it.
Not vengeance. Justice.
Alright, so before we look at the tiers, let's talk a little bit about how do we acquire legendary. So the first step is to unlock the Maw and Torghast, which also is going to unlock the Rune Carver, who you need to craft the actual legendary. This is just a short quest line, so you have to make sure you do that immediately, as well as picking a Covenant once you hit level 60. So the two biggest gates to getting your legendary are the Soul Ash and actually getting the recipes themselves. Now, Soul Ash is earned by completing Torghast each week, and you can get a maximum of 1,200 Soul Ash each week if you complete both available wings. So you only need to do the highest layer, which is layer 8, and in order to get all the rewards from the lower ones. So you don't have to go like layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 every week. So it'll be a pretty quick thing to do. To get a max rank legendary, you actually have to do about 10 weeks of Torghast, and that'll get you a level 235 legendary item. So depending on how you're playing and what your kind of play style is, you might want to consider getting a couple lower tier legendaries first. Rather than trying to, spend 10 weeks maximizing one legendary, you might want to think about getting, you might want to get a PvP legendary and then a PvE legendary, because that'll probably increase your viability in those two things quicker, and then you can start kind of going back and improving those. All right, so the second big gate is the legendary recipe itself, and each individual legendary is going to be retrieved from a certain spot. So we're going to talk a little bit about where those come from in the future, but it's things like about raids, dungeons, from PvP vendors, world bosses, stuff like that. So luckily, we actually learned that these have a 100% drop rate from their specific location, so it's not going to be huge, that big of a deal to get the recipe. So once you get the recipe, it does require several different things. So it requires the Soul Ash, as we talked about before, but it also requires a base item that's going to be crafted by your appropriate profession. So for us Ret Paladins, it's going to be a blacksmith. So if you want to make your own legendary, you're really going to have to be a blacksmith. And then additional to that, it requires 2 missives that are created by scribes, and that actually allows you to pick your secondary stats. So that's one of the big improvements to crafted gear going into Shadowlands, is that you can pick which secondary stats that you get on this legendary. So the higher tier base items are actually gated behind reputation grind, so you won't be able to get them immediately. So you won't be able to get like a 235 eye level legendary right away. You have to start with the lower level one anyway. Alright, so the last thing to consider when you're picking your legendary is that because the item levels on these legendaries are going to scale so high, and presumably they're going to continue to scale as the expansion goes along, you want to make sure that you're crafting the biggest item that you can. And what I mean is that all the legendaries can be crafted onto multiple different types of slots. So for example, the Tempest of the Lightbringer legendary, you can put that on a waist or on your legs, but legs have a higher item budget just because it's a bigger, like chest, legs, and helm have more stats on them, like bracers or boots. So you would want to use the legs in that example because it's going to give you more stats over time. So for the same investment in that legendary, it's going to give you more stats. So you definitely want to use the legs for that particular legendary. All right, so let's go through the legendaries. The first one we're going to look at is Urs Devotion, and for this legendary, you're going to get this from the PvP Honor vendor. For Mythic Plus, I'm going to rank this as C tier, as well as in rating, I'm going to rank this as C tier. It's going to be really, really good for your utility, but since it doesn't affect your DPS, I can't rank it very high. It is, however, an A tier in PvP because it's going to significantly improve our mobility in PvP. So I think it's going to be pretty good. The next one is of Dusk Dawn. This one is going to give you 5% more damage done at 5 holy power and 3% damage reduction at 0 holy power. I think this one's going to be pretty good. I'm actually going to suggest this one as a B tier across the board. The damage reduction is going to be helpful in all situations. The damage done increased will be helpful in all situations. It's a pretty boring legendary and you might have difficulty keeping up the buffs in PvP, but I think overall it's going to be pretty basic, kind of decent legendary. All right, so the Mad Paragon is going to be a decent one for Mythic Plus because you're going to be hitting more Hammer of Wrath, and so that way they'll be doing more damage. But in raids and PvP, it's not going to be all that good. So Mythic Plus, we're going to give it about a B, and then for PvP and raids, we're going to give this one a C. It's definitely going to scale better with Crusade if you choose to take that as a talent. All right, so Magistrates Judgment is kind of in the same boat as Mad Paragon. It's a decent legendary. It's going to generate some holy power for you over a period of time, but it's got a lot of competition with some other legendaries. We're actually going to rank this one as a C across the board. It's going to be okay. It's not a negative legendary, but it's definitely not the first one you want to get, and it's definitely not going to be a strong contender. All right, so we're going to do some juicy ones now. So Tempest of the Lightbringer, this one is going to project your Divine Storm forward 20 yards. It's going to increase the damage of Divine Storm as well. So for this one, I'm going to give this one an S tier in Mythic Plus. It's going to help your cleave damage so much. And beyond that, in PvP and raiding, it's probably not going to be all that good. It kind of depends on your talent setup. So if you're going to run an AoE talent build with things like Empyrean Power and Divine Purpose, then it could potentially be decent in raiding, but I think that's not a typical setup that you're going to use in raiding. So I don't think this one's going to be all that good, but it is going to be really, really strong in Mythic Plus. It's going to allow you to pump more Divine Storms, and the ones that you do pump are going to do a lot more damage, and it's going to effectively increase your range of Divine Storm because it's going to project it forward. So I think it's going to be a good one for Mythic Plus for sure. All right, so Relentless Inquisitor is going to be pretty good for Mythic Plus and for raiding. I'm actually going to give it an A in Mythic Plus and an S in raiding. It's going to give you basically passive haste that's definitely going to make your rotation a lot smoother. And relative to the other legendaries, it's actually gotten a little bit better. They've gotten worse, so it's kind of better relative. And for PvP, it's not going to be very good. I'm going to give this one a C tier because you might have a hard time keeping the buff up. All right, so Vanguard's Momentum, this one has kind of been buffed and changed around a little bit, but it's only going to give you one extra charge of Hammer of Wrath, which is actually going to be pretty decent in Mythic Plus, and it's going to allow you to stack up holy damage 3%, and you'll be able to stack that 3 times, or 9%, every time you use Hammer of Wrath. So I think that's actually pretty decent. I'm going to rank this one as a B in Mythic Plus and raiding. So in Mythic Plus specifically, you're going to be killing a lot of trash, and you're going to be able to use Hammer of Wrath more often, so I think you're actually going to be able to keep this buff up a fair amount of the time, and 9% damage increase is definitely nothing to kind of ignore. It's going to be decent in raiding as well, but I think that in PvP it's not going to be very good. You're probably not going to be able to keep the buff up all that often. All right, and last but certainly not least is Final Verdict, and this one has been kind of nerfed quite a bit, but I think that because of the longer range, it's going to give you a 10-yard range on your Final Verdict, and that's going to replace Templar's Verdict, and it gives you a 15% chance to proc Hammer of Wrath. You're going to be hitting a lot of Final Verdicts. You're still going to get more Hammer of Wraths. It used to be 50%, now it's only 15%, so that's a shame. I'm still going to rank this one an A in Mythic Plus and rating, and I'm going to rank it an S in PvP, and that's mainly because in PvP, having more range on your abilities is going to be great. You're going to be kited all day long, so being able to hit from afar is going to be really important. There's going to be times where you're away from your enemy and you could almost kill them, and if you had Templar's Verdict, you wouldn't be able to, but if you have Final Verdict, you'll be able to hit them, and that will be a game changer. So I think this is going to be a really strong legendary, even with the nerfs. Alright, that's it for the legendary guide. Let me know in the comments what you think about the tier list, and as always, be sure to hash that like button and subscribe for more Ret Paladin content. I'll see you guys in Shadowlands.